Are the beehiiv podcasting features actually any good? I'm Amber Christian, the editor of Handmade Seller magazine. I've spent the last several weeks exploring and using the beehiiv podcasting features. I'd like to walk you through my initial observations, how I'm using it, and who I think benefits from being able to use some of these new podcasting features. But first, a little context. A couple of months back, I started recording audio copies of our articles that we release on our website. I also wanted to do the same thing for our magazine. So this was all a giant content experiment for me to see if I could find new ways to reach readers. So I have, on the plan I'm on with beehiiv, I have access to be able to create one podcast, which makes sense because I wanted to create just one for my overall magazine and be able to release content that way. So now why did I actually look at podcasting? Since I was already producing audio copies of the articles, I started to notice something. When I would attach the audio articles to the individual articles that I was producing, I didn't have a great way to get metrics or be able to see what was going on across the different articles. And since this was a content experiment for me, it really left me wondering, is anybody finding value in this? So I decided to start consolidating the audio articles and then releasing them in one stream as a podcast. But there were several other reasons that I wanted to start exploring putting things together in a podcast. The first one is, I don't know about you, but social media platforms, like other ones outside of YouTube, are continuing to see more throttling. You don't have as much reach. You aren't shown to your followers. And it's getting harder and harder for people to actually find you through those channels. I wanted to explore podcasting to see if I could have content discovery vehicles that are outside of simply social media or my already owned things like an email newsletter list. So basically, I want new people to be able to find my stuff. So that was the first reason to explore podcasting. The second reason was I wanted to have a more accessible product. If you are someone with dyslexia, ADHD, or someone for whom reading long articles is torture, you're never going to subscribe to my magazine. That's not being shown to you in a format that's actually accessible. So I was interested in doing the audio versions and the podcasting as a way to make my content more accessible because this is something that matters to me. And the third reason is I often hear from subscribers, and sometimes I even see this in the cancellations we get, I'm too busy to consume all the content. It really got me stepping back and thinking, there's so much content saturation out there. How do you, for busy handmade business owners, how do you give them other ways other than sitting down and making time to read things? So I wanted to use the audio articles delivered as a podcast as a way to put me in their ears so that they would be able to take me on the go while they're working in a studio, while you're driving to a craft fair or an event, etc. So for me, that was another level of accessibility for my existing readers. So when I first started looking at the beehiiv features, I was not sure. They said, oh, you could do podcasting on beehiiv. What does that exactly mean? So if you've ever done podcasts, there's a lot of pieces to the process. First, there's scheduling guests or just making the time on your own schedule to do it. There's the actual recordings. There's post-processing. Then there are platform uploads, distribution, analytics. There are all sorts of things that go into that process of podcasting. And I wasn't sure, what did they mean when they said they had podcasting features? What they were really talking about as part of this is really about creating that container for your podcast and managing the distribution and the analytics for the podcast. Once I started exploring this, I came to realize they weren't talking about the recording end or scheduling guests or the post-processing of it. They weren't talking about those features. They were talking about what do you do with the end result and then how do you distribute it. So now I started with being able to take some of those existing audio content and I put them into a podcast form. Now remember, I said I wanted to actually have new people be able to find me. And so the first place I started was distribution with Spotify. Now, once you go inside the features for beehiiv, they have an area for episodes. Then they also have a separate area for analytics and then an area for distribution. Within the episodes, there's a couple different ways that you can set things up. You can set up your podcast to be entirely premium, entirely free, or a mix of the two. I was looking to discover new audiences and have new people potentially sign up as well. So I went with a mix of the two. So what that meant I did is I set up what was a free podcast with some premium episodes. So this as a publisher allowed me to deliver some free content as well as deliver some premium content. Spotify and beehiiv have an integration through Spotify's APIs. And what's really interesting about this is this allows you to distribute both your free and your premium episodes to Spotify. And it also allows you to essentially tie Spotify and beehiiv together. So a person that has a subscription, I'm from Handmade Seller, can go into Spotify, and if they click on a premium episode, they can just sign into their account and they can listen to the content. Now, from a discovery perspective, if it's someone new who says, hey, I'm interested in these episodes, they listen to my free episodes, and then they go to click on a premium episode, it takes them to the ability to sign in or sign up for a subscription. So it seamlessly manages that ability for you to route through your beehiiv setup and be able to create that for your episodes. So I thought that was actually a really neat thing to be able to do with the podcast, and I've been very excited about it. Now, typically my understanding is that Spotify is about the second largest podcasting platform in terms of distribution, and I loved seeing that you can actually integrate them in this way. So that was actually the very first thing that I set up in terms of the infrastructure and the setup. The second one that I did was Apple Podcasts. Now, in full disclosure, I'm an Android user, so attempting to use a lot of things in the Apple ecosystem when you are an Android user is clunky at best, to be fair. Apple has really built things for their ecosystem, and it doesn't always work great when it's Android. But I did manage to sort of fumble my way through some basic setup and be able to get my RSS feeds sent over to Apple Podcasts as well. Okay, who else did I set up? As part of this, I thought, what the heck, go big or go home, right? If you're gonna really do a content experiment, you might as well do a content experiment. So I started systematically, one by one, working my way through the list. Probably took me 4 or 5 hours between getting set up on the different platforms. Some of them you get set up on Apple Podcasts first, and then it makes those platforms easy. You can follow the beehiiv help instructions on this. They walk you through all of this, and they're actually pretty good help instructions. So I'd encourage you to look at that if you actually want the specific click here, click there. Now, each of these platforms, it looks a little bit different. I even set up YouTube. This one was pretty interesting, and I actually had to ask beehiiv some questions about this as well. One of the things I learned is that the way that the descriptions passed through from beehiiv to YouTube, when they arrived in YouTube, they were ugly. But that wasn't really because of beehiiv. It was how YouTube ingested the delivery of the show description. Episode itself, recordings, totally fine. What I opted to do as part of that is actually to set up a playlist in YouTube and set everything to not just go publicly to everyone at first, because I wanted to clean up some of those descriptions and fix some things in there. So I did set up distribution to YouTube, but I do a little of what I'd call post-processing once I send that information over. So essentially, what I'm using beehiiv for is my distribution, right, to all these platforms. If you are already producing or already doing podcasting, you might be using something like Spotify. They have a lot of these features. Or you might be paying for using a third-party hosting platform that pushes out to other platforms. Essentially, if you're a creator and you're already using beehiiv, this makes a lot of sense to use things, particularly in my case where I was starting something new. I can't really speak for should you migrate your existing podcast or kind of how that might be completely different. I don't know. I was starting pretty fresh with what I was doing, and this was a great use case for me to get going on that. So now I have some lessons learned, and I'd summarize probably 5 key observations or lessons learned from this initial process of getting everything set up and getting it all distributing. I'm sure I will have more in the future as I continue to get into this further. Got to remember, I'm just a couple weeks into this, so I'll be sharing more as I learn more and I get more episodes and things set up through the podcasting. So the first key lesson learned is you really have to intentionally think about how your show descriptions work. And really that is about how it shows up on some of the other platforms. beehiiv gives you a very generous space in order to set all that up, and it looks beautiful on Spotify. It passes through absolutely gorgeously. However, there's a lot of legacy podcast providers, and they all have kind of these slightly different setups in terms of how much they show you. So one thing I would suggest that you do as part of that is actually really think about what that description looks like as it's flowing through to those platforms. For example, iHeartRadio, it's a pretty short description in terms of what flows through there. So I had to really think about, okay, if I'm wanting them to do both my free and paid stuff, how do they even know that paid stuff's there? So I really had to think about that description, what I actually passed through to them. The second thing I already mentioned was really about YouTube. And then Amazon Music as well has, while it's a very nice layout, you really only have so much real estate for your descriptions. So first lesson learned, really think about your show description, make sure what you've got in there is exactly what you would want as you're passing it through to some of these other platforms. The second thing is I'm starting only with the beehiiv analytics. I'm very well aware that you can connect a bunch of different analytics platforms to get more robust analytics. For me, I wasn't ready to do that yet. So I am just sticking with the baseline beehiiv analytics. I know that means it's probably a little bit more limited than what I would be able to do if I plugged in a different, more in-depth third-party tool, but I'm okay with that. I'm early stage. This is a content experiment. I'm learning a lot as I go through it. I can always add some of those things a little bit later. The third observation, deeper integrations to get new customers are really only available on Spotify. So when I produce both free and premium episodes, right? I have a overall kind of free bucket set up on my beehiiv podcast. And then within that, there's free episodes and then some premium episodes. And those premium episodes are set up to kind of be my teaser to try to get people to subscribe. Those premium episodes to the other podcast platforms, those don't pass through. They pass through to Spotify, but they don't pass to the other platforms because otherwise you couldn't paywall them. So for me, really the key is Spotify's really the main one where you can have that really nice premium integration. And I'm looking forward to seeing how does this evolve. I'm not even sure, I'm not in the weeds of how every platform handles some of this kind of stuff, but I am looking forward to seeing, are there other ways to do similar kinds of monetization things on platforms outside of Spotify? I genuinely don't know. The next one is I actually really like organizing the episodes into a podcast, making it available this way. It's a really nice way to organize the content for people. It's better than attaching those individual audio recordings to articles the way I was doing. I couldn't really get very good reporting when I was doing it that way. And that was also an experiment. And I realized, oh, you don't get very great information about that, nor can you organize it in a seamless way and report on it in a seamless way. Podcasting is allowing me to then look at how many people are listening to these episodes in a much more seamless way so I can figure out, are people even listening to this? Is this content experiment going to work? Do people like it? Do they hate it? Is it a success? Is it a failure? It's hard to know if you can't do reporting on it. But by moving it into the podcasting, I can do reporting on how that audio content is performing. So that's also very interesting to me. And then the fifth thing I would add is I think the integrations that beehiiv has built with podcasting into the rest of the platform have been rather thoughtful, and I've appreciated those. So for example, once you create a podcast episode, you can then embed those episodes in other places right through the editor. So if you are, in my case, I write an article first, I save it as a draft, I record the audio version of it, and then I upload it as a podcast episode. I can just embed that podcast episode back in the post. It's a very nice and seamless way to do this with the editor, and it makes it pretty easy for me to use that. The other hidden benefit of that too is I also started experimenting with adding recordings right into my newsletter that goes out to my paid subscribers. So simply embedding the list of the audio content in there as well. Super easy, and it's really slick. So those are kind of my initial 5 key lessons learned. Like I said, I'm not that far into it. I'm a few weeks into it. I'll have more to share once I'm 2, 3, 4 months into it, and I have a lot more content recorded as part of that. So if you liked this episode, please make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so that you continue to see these other real-world experiences that I have as an operator on beehiiv.